And as we jump into episode 11, Frieren has defeated Aura. But in the aftermath of the battle, the bodies of the knights that she used like puppets lay on the floor. Tons of them. They're all dead. Frieren would begin to pray. Soon after, Frieren would arrive. She acknowledges that Frieren has defeated Aura. But the scene afterwards is so gruesome. It shows all of the knights that fell to Aura's scale of submission, all dead. Her and Frieren would grieve. We would go to the next scene, and after some time had passed, Grant and Stark would arrive. And as they lay their eyes on this crazy scene, Frieren and Fern hilariously try to run. Stark says, wait. He tells them that Granite, the leader of the village, is going to pardon them. Granite would then give his gratitude to Frieren and says, thank you. You honored my men in death. I appreciate it. The camera would pan to Frieren, and she would be talking to Stark and Fern. She explains that she had to restrain herself because last time she battled Aura, she destroyed these knights and didn't care at all. She would go ahead and explain to them further that Himmel was mad at her for that. But after she finishes her story, I believe the anime showcases and shows us that she's grown. She's learned from her mistakes. She could have easily destroyed these knights, but she chose not to. And as we move along, Frieren would congratulate Fern and Stark on defeating the demon Lugner. After she praises them, the Graf Granite, the leader of the village, is looking over her. He can't help but have admiration for her. And as we move along, he makes his way towards Frieren to escort them back to the village. As he's walking, one of his comrades stops him. He would then look down at the dead knight. And as he looks, the anime highlights the charm on the knight's neck. I don't know what it means, but it gets Granite very emotional. He would praise Frieren again. And not only that, he would offer her any reward that she wanted. And for some reason, Frieren chose the legendary mage Flam's grimoire on barrier techniques and the ones specific to this village and how they work. Granite would say, well, that book. Frieren would say, I know, it's fake. She acknowledges and says, I still want it. Moving on a little bit, Granite tells them that he's told the town folk that they've defeated Aura. He says, go and celebrate with them. They're waiting on you. And as they make their way into the town, the people would spot them and show them love and admiration. And as the whole town celebrates them, the scene is filled with joy, music, love. And as the celebration ends, we go to the next day, and it would be full of respect because they would be having a memorial for all of the fallen knights that died in Aura's army. And as Frieren and the rest of her crew give their goodbyes and respect, Granite asks them, are they going to end the northernmost part of the map where the Demon King lay? He would warn them on the problems that's going on over there. He'd tell them that travel is restricted, and even adventurers would need a first-class mage. Fern would say, bruh, we good. We have Miss Frieren. Frieren would say, wait, what is a first-class mage? Fern would say, it's when you get your certification for being a mage. She then shows Frieren. Frieren hints at not having hers. Fern says, wait, so you're an undocumented mage? Frieren says, don't make it sound like that. She explains that it's a hassle. The organizations that regulate over mages change a lot. She would say, and I can't be worried about getting another certification every time. And as we move along, she says, but we have to do that before we move to the next step. And so just like that, her and the crew would go to Arburst, the largest magical city in the Northern Lands. There, she'll take her exam for her certification. And as they pay their respect and say their goodbyes to Granite, they will make their way to the Northern Lands. And on their travel, they will see that it's snowing. It's becoming winter. Frieren would then warn them that the winters in the Northern Lands are brutal. And they would see this firsthand because as they travel, they run into a snowstorm. And it would be so bad they would get lost. But Frieren remembers an old shelter that's around. And so she takes them there. But surprisingly, as they arrive, they meet Kraft the monk. He's an elf. Fern finds him weird. She said, let's leave. And after being off-put by him at first, they would work together as a group and survive 6 months of the winter. And as the winter fades away, the scene would capture him and Frieren talking about religion and faith. He would give his ideology, and Frieren would question that. And at the end of their conversation, Frieren would express that she doesn't believe in this so-called goddess that he speaks of. She believes that these are only desires that we all seek from the heart, like validation. And that's what I think she gets from Frank. He wants validation from this so-called goddess. As we continue, Frank just says, let's put aside our differences and let's just get to know each other. At this moment, Frank reminds her of Heater the priest, and Frieren would go to a flashback of them talking. And Heater the priest would share some of the same thoughts on religion as Frank. And so this sparked the flashback. He would say he would hope that this so-called goddess would be proud of him too. Frieren's like, yeah, whatever. He says, Frieren, if you don't believe in the goddess, then how about I praise you? She says, I haven't done anything praiseworthy. He would say, no, you've been suppressing your mana for this whole time, your whole life. That's quite the accomplishment. She says, how do you know that? He says, well, we've been traveling for a long time. They would continue to talk, and as the flashback ends, Heater would tell her that he might have a daughter that's a mage. Could she please explain the story of how she suppressed her mana for this long? After the wholesome scene, we go back to the present, and she'd be talking to Frank. She would tell him that she's already had a friend that praises her. She doesn't need his praises. He says, well then, you have good friends. Frieren then would think about Heater. She says, but he's passed now. Frank says, well, he's in heaven. You'll see him again. And in my opinion, I think this scene showcases Frieren starting to believe a little bit in faith. And she would agree. She says, you're right. After this conversation, they would both say their goodbyes to each other. Frank would leave. Frieren and the crew would wave him off. And that's where the anime ends.